Hi, my friends. Today I want to present you a new story. Enjoy watching it.
I sat huddled on a bench in the city park, the cold biting through my thin jacket. It had been another long, fruitless day searching for work, and the exhaustion was starting to set in. The park was empty, save for the occasional passerby who barely glanced in my direction. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the pavement, I wondered how I would make it through another night. My stomach growled in protest, and I hugged myself tighter, trying to ward off the chill. My thoughts were interrupted by the purr of an engine. I looked up to see a sleek black car pull up to the curb. The car was an Aston Martin, a vehicle I had only seen in movies or passing by on rare occasions. A man stepped out, his tailored suit and polished shoes a stark contrast to my ragged appearance. He walked toward me with purpose, his expression unreadable. "Melanie, right?" he asked, his voice smooth and confident. I nodded, my curiosity piqued. "Yes, that's me. How do you know my name?" He smiled, a gesture that seemed practiced. "My name is Barry Sanders. I have a proposition for you." Barry Sanders. The name rang a bell. He was a well-known figure in the business world, a young entrepreneur who had made his fortune in tech. What could he possibly want with me? "I've done some research," he continued as if reading my thoughts. "I know you're struggling. I can help you, but I need your help in return." I raised an eyebrow, intrigued despite myself. "What kind of help are we talking about?" Barry glanced around, ensuring no one was within earshot. "I need someone to pretend to be my fiance," he said quietly. "My mother, Marion, is insistent that I settle down. She's been trying to set me up with various socialites, and it's becoming unbearable. I need a way to get her off my back, at least for a while." I stared at him, incredulous. "You want me to pretend to be your fiancé? Why me?" "Because you're perfect for the role," he replied without hesitation. "You're not part of my social circle, so there's no risk of gossip. And let's be honest, you could use the money and the stability." He wasn't wrong. The thought of having a warm place to sleep and a steady income was incredibly tempting, but it all seemed too good to be true. "What would I have to do?" I asked cautiously. "You would move in with me, attend a few social events, and act like we're in love. In return, I'll give you a job at my company and a place to live. After a few months, we'll stage a breakup, and you can keep the job and the apartment." It was a lot to take in. The idea of living a lie, even for a short time, made my stomach churn. But the alternative was far less appealing. "All right," I said finally. "I'll do it." Barry's smile widened, and for the first time it seemed genuine. "Great, we start tomorrow." He put a piece of paper in my hand. "Come to this address tomorrow morning." As I watched him walk back to his car, I couldn't shake the feeling that my life was about to change in ways I couldn't even begin to imagine. The next morning, I found myself standing in front of a grand 3-story townhouse in the most affluent part of the city. I hesitated before ringing the doorbell, the reality of what I was about to do sinking in. This was a world I had never been a part of, and I felt like an imposter. The door swung open, revealing Barry dressed casually in jeans and a sweater, looking every bit the relaxed billionaire. "Come in, Melanie," he said, stepping aside to let me enter. I walked into the foyer, my eyes widening at the opulence. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and tasteful artwork adorned the walls. It was like stepping into a palace. "Welcome to your new home," Barry said with a smile. "I'll show you to your room." He led me up a sweeping staircase to a beautifully furnished bedroom with an ensuite bathroom. The bed was a king size, covered in plush linens, and the closet was stocked with designer clothes in my size. "Wow," I breathed, still in awe. "This is incredible." Barry chuckled. "Get used to it. We have a lot to do to get you ready for our first event tomorrow night." The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. I was introduced to a personal stylist who fussed over my hair and makeup, and a tailor who ensured that my new clothes fit perfectly. Barry coached me on our backstory, teaching me about his family and friends and how to navigate the social events we would be attending. By the time we sat down for dinner, I was exhausted. Barry had his chef prepare a gourmet meal, and as we ate, I couldn't help but feel a pang of discomfort. This was a far cry from the simple meals I was used to. One afternoon, as we were going through old photo albums to get a sense of his childhood, I noticed a sadness in his eyes. You don't seem too thrilled about these memories, I remarked gently. He looked up, his expression momentarily vulnerable. It's complicated. My childhood wasn't exactly normal. My parents had high expectations, and I had to live up to them. I nodded, understanding more than he realized. I get it. I had to grow up fast too. My parents died when I was young, and I was in and out of foster homes. Barry reached out, placing a hand on mine. I'm sorry, Melanie. I didn't know. It's all right, I said, giving him a small smile. It made me who I am today. We continued our preparations, and I found myself growing more comfortable with Barry. Despite the initial awkwardness, there was a genuine kindness in him that I hadn't expected. The night of the charity ball arrived, and I stood in front of the mirror, taking in my reflection. The stylist Barry had hired had worked wonders. My hair was elegantly styled, and the deep blue gown I wore accentuated my figure perfectly. I hardly recognized myself. Barry appeared at the doorway, looking dashing in a black tuxedo. You look stunning, he said, his eyes reflecting admiration. Thank you, I replied, feeling a blush creep up my cheeks. You yourself look good. We arrived at the ball, the grand venue buzzing with the city's elite. As we stepped into the ballroom, all eyes turned towards us. Barry squeezed my hand reassuringly, and I pasted on a smile, determined to play my part convincingly. We mingled with the guests, Barry introducing me to everyone as his fiance. I felt the weight of their scrutiny but managed to hold my own, thanks in large part to Barry's unwavering support. As the evening progressed, we found ourselves alone on a balcony overlooking the city. The cool night air was a welcome relief from the crowded ballroom. You're doing great, Barry said, his voice warm and encouraging. I'm trying, I replied, leaning on the railing. It's just a lot to take in. I know, he said, stepping closer. But you're stronger than you think, Melanie. I see it in you. Before I could respond, a voice interrupted us. Barry, darling, there you are. I turned to see a tall, elegant woman approaching us. Her presence exuded confidence and authority. This had to be Marion, Barry's mother. Mother, Barry said, his tone polite but reserved. I'd like you to meet Melanie. Marion's eyes flicked over me, her gaze assessing. So, you're the woman who's captured my son's heart, she said, her tone laced with skepticism. Yes, ma'am, I replied, trying to sound confident. It's a pleasure to meet you. The pleasure is mine, she said, though her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Barry speaks highly of you. We exchanged pleasantries, but it was clear Marion wasn't entirely convinced. She excused herself shortly after, leaving me feeling uneasy. She's not an easy woman to impress, Barry said, sensing my discomfort. I noticed, I replied, trying to shake off the encounter. But we'll manage. As we drove home, I glanced at Barry, who seemed lost in thought. What's on your mind? I asked. He looked at me, his expression softening. Just thinking about how well you did tonight. You were amazing, Melanie. His words warmed me, and for a moment I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, this crazy arrangement could work. The next morning I woke up early, determined to get a head start on my new life. I made my way to the kitchen, hoping to find some coffee. To my surprise, Barry was already there. A mug in hand and a newspaper spread out on the counter. Good morning, he greeted me with a smile. I made some coffee. Help yourself. Thanks, I replied, pouring myself a cup. You're up early. Old habits, he said with a shrug. I usually go for a run before work. Care to join me? I hesitated, not sure if I could keep up with his pace, but then I nodded. Sure, why not? We jogged through the quiet streets, the city slowly coming to life around us. It felt good to move, to breathe in the fresh air, and for a little while, I forgot about the charade we were playing. Barry was surprisingly easy to talk to, and we chatted about everything from our favorite books to our childhood memories. As we rounded a corner, Barry slowed to a walk, catching his breath. You're not bad, Melanie, he said, grinning. I'm impressed. Thanks, I said, feeling a flush of pride. I used to run track in high school. We made our way back to the townhouse, and Barry glanced at his watch. I've got a meeting this morning, but I'll be back in the afternoon. Feel free to explore the house. Make yourself at home. I nodded, still feeling a bit overwhelmed but grateful for the opportunity. Thanks, Barry. I'll see you later. After Barry left, I wandered through the house, marveling at the sheer luxury of it all. I found a library filled with books, a home theater, and even a gym. It was like living in a dream. Later that afternoon, Barry returned with a surprise. "I thought we could go shopping," he said, holding up his car keys. "You need a wardrobe for all these events, and I want you to pick out things you like." I blinked, taken aback. "Shopping? With you?" He laughed. "Yes, with me. Come on, it'll be fun." We spent the next few hours in the city's high-end boutiques, with Barry encouraging me to try on anything that caught my eye. I felt like a princess in a fairy tale, and by the time we headed back home, the trunk of the car was filled with bags of new clothes. The days turned into weeks, and the act of pretending to be Barry's fiance began to feel strangely normal. We attended more events, and with each one, I grew more confident in my role. Barry and I spent hours together, and I found myself enjoying his company more than I had expected. One evening, we were lounging in the living room, a rare moment of relaxation. Barry was scrolling through his phone while I read a book. Suddenly, he looked up, a mischievous glint in his eyes. "How do you feel about a spontaneous trip?" he asked. I raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Where to?" "Paris," he said, grinning. "I have a meeting there, but we can make a weekend out of it. What do you say?" The idea of traveling to Paris was both thrilling and daunting. "I've never been," I admitted. "Then it's settled," Barry said, his excitement infectious. "We leave tomorrow." Paris was everything I had imagined and more. The city was a blend of history and modernity, its streets alive with energy. We stayed in a luxurious hotel overlooking the Seine, and Barry made sure we experienced the best the city had to offer. One afternoon, as we strolled along the Champs-Élysées, Barry stopped in front of a small, quaint cafe. "How about a coffee?" he suggested. We sat outside, watching the world go by. The conversation flowed easily, and I found myself opening up to Barry in ways I hadn't with anyone in a long time. "You know," I said, taking a sip of my coffee, "this whole arrangement has been a whirlwind, but I'm glad I did it. I'm glad I met you." Barry smiled, his eyes reflecting a warmth that made my heart flutter. "I'm glad too, Melanie. You've been a breath of fresh air." As we sat there, I realized that what had started as a desperate gamble was turning into something far more meaningful. Barry and I had come a long way from that first meeting in the park, and I couldn't wait to see where this journey would take us next. But little did I know, our biggest challenges were yet to come, and the road ahead would be filled with unexpected twists and turns. Life in Barry's world was becoming more familiar, yet every day brought new surprises. Paris had been a revelation, not just of the city's beauty but of Barry's depths as a person. As we returned to our routine in the city, I found myself looking forward to our time together, the moments when the pretense slipped away, and we could simply be ourselves. One evening, we attended a gala at the art museum. Barry's hand rested lightly on my back as we made our way through the opulent halls, pausing to admire the artwork. I felt the eyes of the crowd on us, but Barry's presence was a comforting anchor. We stopped in front of a large painting, a vibrant landscape that seemed to pulse with life. "What do you think?" Barry asked, his voice low. "It's beautiful," I said, mesmerized by the colors. "There's so much energy in it." Barry nodded. "The artist is known for capturing the essence of life in his work. It's one of my favorites." As we stood there, a woman approached us, her elegant dress shimmering under the lights. "Barry, darling, it's been too long," she said, her voice a practiced purr. "Charlotte," Barry said, his tone polite but cool. "This is Melanie, my fiancée." Charlotte's eyes flicked to me, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "How lovely to meet you, Melanie." "Barry, you've certainly outdone yourself this time." "Thank you," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's a pleasure to meet you too." As Charlotte moved on, I turned to Barry. "Old flame?" I asked, trying to keep the jealousy out of my voice. "Something like that," Barry said with a shrug. "It's all in the past." As the weeks passed, Barry and I settled into a rhythm. We attended social events, went on spontaneous outings, and spent quiet evenings at home. The line between pretense and reality blurred, and I found myself falling for him, despite the nagging reminder that this was all supposed to be temporary. One rainy afternoon, Barry suggested we visit a nearby bookstore. It was a cozy, old-fashioned place with shelves that seemed to stretch on forever. We spent hours browsing, discussing our favorite books, and discovering new ones. As we walked back to the townhouse, laden with our purchases, Barry turned to me. "There's a place I'd like to show you," he said, his eyes twinkling with mischief. We made our way to a small park, its paths winding through lush greenery. Barry led me to a secluded spot where a hidden garden lay, vibrant with flowers. "I used to come here as a kid," he said, his voice soft. "It was my escape." "It's beautiful," I said, taking in the serene beauty of the place. "Thank you for sharing it with me." Barry looked at me, his expression serious. "Melanie, I know this started as an arrangement, but I've come to care for you, more than I ever expected." My heart pounded in my chest. "Barry, I care for you too. But this was supposed to be temporary. What happens when your mother finds out?" "We'll deal with that when the time comes," he said, taking my hand. "Right now, all I know is that I don't want to lose you." Our relationship deepened, but the looming presence of Barry's mother, Marion, cast a shadow over our happiness. We managed to avoid her scrutiny for a while, but it was only a matter of time before she discovered the truth. One evening, as we were preparing for yet another event, Barry received a call. His expression grew tense as he listened, and when he hung up, he turned to me, his face pale. "My mother wants to see us. She knows something is up." My stomach twisted with dread. "What are we going to do?" "We'll face her together," Barry said, his voice firm. "No matter what happens." We arrived at Marion's mansion, the grandeur of the place doing little to calm my nerves. Marion greeted us with a cold smile, leading us to the sitting room. She gestured for us to sit, her eyes never leaving mine. "So Melanie," she began, her tone deceptively pleasant. "Tell me about yourself. How did you and Barry meet?" I launched into our rehearsed story, but Marion's gaze remained piercing, as if she could see right through the facade. When I finished, she leaned back, her smile even colder. "Interesting," she said, "but I'm not convinced. Barry, do you think I'm a fool?" "Mother, please," Barry began, but Marion silenced him with a sharp look. "I know this is all an act," she said, turning to me. "And I want to hear the truth from you, Melanie. What did my son promise you?" My throat went dry, but I forced myself to meet her gaze. "He offered me a job and a place to stay," I admitted, my voice trembling. "But it's not just about that anymore. I care about Barry." Marion's eyes narrowed. "Do you really? Or are you just after his money?" "Mother, stop," Barry interjected, his voice angry. "This isn't fair." "Fair?" Marion's laugh was bitter. "You think this is about fairness? You're being manipulated, Barry. Can't you see that?" The argument escalated, voices rising until I couldn't take it anymore. "Stop," I cried, standing up. "This was never supposed to happen. I was just trying to survive." Barry's eyes met mine, filled with pain. "Melanie, don't." But I couldn't stay. Not with Marion's accusations hanging in the air. I fled the room, tears blurring my vision as I ran out of the mansion. I packed my things, my heart breaking with every item I stuffed into my bag. Barry found me in the bedroom, his face a mask of sorrow. "Melanie, please don't go," he pleaded. "I have to," I said, my voice choked with emotion. "This was a mistake. I don't belong in your world." "You belong with me," he said, his voice desperate. "I don't care about the arrangement anymore. I love you." "I love you too," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "But this is too much. Your mother will never accept me." "Then we'll make her," Barry insisted, but I shook my head. "I can't, Barry. I'm sorry." With a final, heartbreaking look, I left the townhouse, leaving behind the man I had come to love and the life I had started to dream of. The weeks that followed were a blur of pain and confusion. I tried to move on, to return to the life I had known before Barry, but nothing felt the same. I missed him desperately, but I knew I had made the right choice. Barry deserved someone who fit into his world, not a girl from the streets pretending to be something she wasn't. 3 months had passed since I left Barry's world behind. The city streets felt colder without him, and the promise of a dream job and a luxurious home seemed like distant memories. I returned to the homeless shelter, but even in the familiarity of old routines, a part of me remained with Barry. One crisp autumn afternoon, I was volunteering at the shelter's small garden, tending to the last of the summer blooms. The rhythmic motions of gardening were soothing, helping to clear my mind. As I brushed a strand of hair from my face, I heard the sound of approaching footsteps. I looked up to see a familiar figure standing at the gate. "Melanie," Barry called, his voice a mixture of hope and trepidation. My heart skipped a beat. "Barry, what are you doing here?" He stepped closer, his eyes never leaving mine. "I've been looking for you. Everywhere." I stood up, brushing the dirt from my hands. "Why, Barry? We agreed this was for the best." He shook his head, a determined glint in his eyes. "You agreed. I never did. I've spent these months trying to convince myself to move on. But I can't. I love you, Melanie, and I'm willing to fight for us." Tears welled up in my eyes as I took a step toward him. "But your mother." "Mother was wrong," Barry interrupted, his voice firm. "She came to see me a week after you left. She apologized for everything, for the way she treated you. She realized she was holding onto her own fears and prejudices. She even asked me to find you." I blinked, hardly daring to believe it. "She did." Barry nodded. "She wants to meet you again, properly this time. No pretense, no arrangements. Just us." A smile broke through my tears. "Barry, I never stopped loving you." He closed the distance between us, taking my hands in his. "And I never will. Let's start over, Melanie. No more pretending. Just you and me, building a future together." I looked into his eyes, seeing the sincerity and love there. "I'd like that," I whispered. A few weeks later, we stood in Marion's elegant sitting room once more, but this time the atmosphere was entirely different. Marion greeted me with a warm smile, her eyes soft with understanding. "Melanie," she said, taking my hands in hers, "I owe you a sincere apology. I was wrong to judge you without knowing your story. Barry has told me everything, and I can see how much you mean to him." "Thank you, Marion," I replied, my voice steady. "I appreciate that." Barry stood beside me, his hand resting on my back in silent support. "We're going to make this work," he said, his voice filled with determination. Marion nodded, her smile widening. "I believe you will." We got married. The wedding was luxurious. As the months turned into years, Barry and I built a life together that was richer and more fulfilling than either of us had ever imagined. We moved into a cozy apartment in the heart of the city. Barry continued to thrive in his business, but he also found time for the simple joys we shared. Afternoons at the bookstore, quiet walks in the park, and spontaneous adventures. I found a job at a community center, helping those who were struggling just as I had once been. It was rewarding work, and Barry supported me every step of the way. One evening, as we sat together on the couch, the city lights twinkling outside our window, Barry turned to me with a smile. "Remember the first time we met?" I laughed, leaning into him. "How could I forget? You offered me a house and a job just to pretend to be your fiance. And look at us now," he said, his eyes filled with love. "No pretending, just us." I smiled, feeling a profound sense of happiness and contentment.